The Animal Protection Law of 2004 was kind of ahead of many other countries to a certain extent. So it was a very progressive law, but there were very many problems in its application. I'm Cansu, and we are volunteers for Animal Rights Watch Committee of Turkey. And we were founded in 2014, and the purpose of our foundation was to monitor and report the animal rights violations in Turkey. We have been giving quite a bit of legal fight in the past almost 10 years. We've been doing a lot of lobbying for possible modifications to the law, which was passed in 2004. It was the first animal rights law. Rather, it was called Animal Protection Law of Turkey, which was passed in 2004. And we have also been following up on a lot of legal struggles, particular individual cases of animal rights violations. We also have a group of volunteers who are lawyers. Ezgi is one of them. And we've also been running workshops on speciesism, for adults and children alike, particularly the younger population. So the idea for this presentation actually came from another meeting that we attended. And during that meeting, we realized that there were a lot of volunteers from other countries who did not have an animal rights law yet in their country. So we wanted to share with them the legal fight that we have given over the years and the campaigns that we have run over the years in order for them to learn from our failures mostly, because it has been a failure if you look at it for the bottom line. I mean, obviously it's a drop in the ocean, but we did not necessarily have the gains that we wished we would have. And since 2004, the discussions over a possible modification and improvement on the law, animal rights law, have been continuing. After a few minor changes throughout the years, and there were several attempts at reform, and they were also accompanied by major protests by animal rights defenders nationwide. And the Animal Protection Law of 2004 was kind of ahead of many other countries to a certain extent. So it was a very progressive law, but there were very many problems in its application. So on paper, everything looked fine, but de facto, we couldn't get the municipalities and the government to actually apply those laws, as it happens in many other social movements, as you know. So as Animal Rights Watch Committee of Turkey, we knew that the law would change, and we wanted to make sure that it would change in a positive manner. So there was a commission that was founded in 2019. It was actually as a result of a joint motion by 5 political parties, which was a very rare occurrence in Turkey. So we also contributed to the report by formulating our suggestions for the changes in the law. The change came about in 2021, but did not realize almost any of the propositions that we made and that were also made in the Commission's report. And what I will present to you now is what we wanted, and what Ezgi will present is what we got. So that you will see in what ways we have in a way failed. So the most problematic aspect of the current amended law is related to an article that regulates crimes against animals. And as it stands now, citizens and NGOs have no direct right to make criminal complaints, except in cases of catching the perpetrator in the act, or legally being the owner of the animal. And you can imagine how difficult that is, because you might know that someone actually raped a dog, which happens more often than one might think, but then you will have to hire a private investigator to actually make sure the person rapes an animal again, so that you can put it in a record and then later on make a complaint. So we also wanted to make sure that there was a distinction between there was no longer a distinction between crimes against owned and stray animals. As you probably know, we have cohabited the cities with stray animals for many centuries now. There are around, of course, the numbers vary, but there are, depending on who is counting, the numbers are between a few 100,000 to around 8 million for dogs, for stray dogs. So we also wanted a deterrent prison sentence for killing, cruel treatment, torture, sexual violence, animal fighting, or acts that lead to the extinction of a species, from simple to aggravated acts that violate the physical integrity and right to life of animals. We wanted to make sure that all offenses actually carried prison sanctions. Because what would usually happen is, particularly if it was a stray animal, you could kill the stray animal and just pay a fine. Ezgi will talk about them in more detail. And even after there was a prison sentence, that prison sentence would be deferred. Again, Ezgi will talk about it in more detail. So then, whoever the criminal is, like even if it was a municipality worker whose job is to actually take care of the animal in temporary animal shelters, even if it was a civilian, even if it is the owner of the animal in question, the acts were rarely punished and very leniently, if punished at all. So we wanted the law to have clear lower limits and impose higher penalties, de facto, even if the law was ideal, sometimes it was not really practiced. We wanted the breeding, trade, and sale of domestic and exotic animals to be prohibited and treated as a crime. And we wanted it to be punishable by imprisonment ranging from 4 months to 3 years. Because the main problem of the stray animal population, that it is continuously rising, is, of course, the lack of a proper spay and neuter practice nationwide, which is taking place. Since the 90s now, the numbers of stray animals are much fewer. And I am old enough to remember the 90s, and I mean, one can tell the difference, obviously. But the other problem is, of course, the abandonment of previously owned companion animals. When we are writing a report for the Commission, we always have to make sure that prohibition of animal cruelty, what we define as animal cruelty, won't be financially detrimental to business owners or to the government. So that's how we try to convince them somehow. So the Commission report stated that the banning of sale of cats and dogs in pet shops would not cause significant financial losses to the businesses. And we wanted the sales of companion animals to be discontinued. And we wanted to make sure that people who wanted to spend their lives with a companion animal should adopt from shelters. So what the amendment did instead, they introduced a ban on selling animals in the pet shops, but now you choose them from a catalog. So there are breeding farms somewhere where you can't really see if the current regulations are even being violated, so that you could actually punish them. Obviously, you know all the reasons why we want to ban on breeding and sales of companion animals, so I won't go into the detail. There was one article of the law which many of the animal rights activists in Turkey have considered to be a red line, and that is the 6th article of the animal protection law. The law states that animals that have been spayed and neutered, completed their rehabilitation period in shelters and cannot be rehomed, should be returned to their original location. So wherever you round them up from, you have to leave the animal there, because that's where they have been living for years sometimes. So they tried to introduce some trap clauses, like They cannot be placed in crowded places like schools, hospitals, parks, places of worship, because for whatever reason, I mean, you can fill in the blanks, because it's not safe for children to be around dogs, because it's not, they're not clean animals, so they shouldn't be around mosques, and so on and so forth. But that trap clause, fortunately, did not pass. We wanted to make sure that government and municipalities did not create large-scale, what we call concentration camps, in a way outside the city, because most of the time volunteers are not allowed access to them, and we don't know what's going on in those shelters. And even the shelters that are accessible to us, to volunteers, do not have proper staff. Veterinarians, veterinary technicians. Therefore, what we can see is already bad enough. So we didn't want them to take place in larger scale in those huge camps outside of the cities. So we wanted to make sure that all municipalities, big and small, establish those what is called rehabilitation centers in the laws, that they could do spaying and neutering and rehabilitation and release the animals afterwards. We also wanted full-service animal hospitals for the needs of disabled and vulnerable animals. If they are not adopted, we didn't want them to spend the rest of their lives on concrete lying. I mean, rest of their lives is very short if they are left in a shelter, obviously. You know, babies, particularly baby animals and senior animals, are very vulnerable to diseases which have a tendency to spread really fast in concentrated environments. Then the rest were about having exotic animals or wild animals as pets. We wanted a very clear ban on that. Which did exist in the former law, but it wasn't clear enough, so it couldn't be applied. We wanted the zoos, all 34 of them that exist in Turkey today, to be transformed into wildlife rescue centers. We also wanted to make sure that animal circuses, dolphin parks should be banned, and existing facilities should be closed within a maximum of 1 year. They amended the law and they did ban new dolphin parks from opening, but they will close them, or they will have to close them in a matter of 10 years, which is a long time because there were already violations that are taking place in these dolphin parks. They are not allowed to breed them, but they do anyway, and so on and so forth. There were, of course, lots of reports. I mean, as you can imagine, like illegal purchases of dolphins and other sea animals. And there are also illegal dolphin therapies that sometimes even municipalities support. So it's the same as everywhere else, basically, about dolphin parks. We wanted live animal trade to be banned, and we wanted the facilities like slaughterhouses where animal farm animals are kept to be monitored 24/7 with cameras, that it should be accessible to the public through the ministry. It is a common issue that, you know, there are lots of transportation of animals brought over from overseas. It was very recent that We Animals actually recorded a very recent passage from one of the border towns in Turkey. There are, of course, lots of rights violations there that basically, I mean, obviously the thing itself is a violation, but we had lots of welfareist suggestions as well. So we wanted restrictions and bans on all animal experiments, and we wanted all types of animals to be banned from being used in experiments, including cats and dogs, but not only them. We wanted horse-drawn carriages and horse-drawn carts to be banned, and that municipalities establish special protection areas and facilities where those animals would be allocated to. Actually, an example of this did take place. There was an horse-drawn carriage ban in the biggest of the Prince's Islands near Istanbul. But the aftermath did not work so well. So it was banned, but later on the horses were sold to other farms, sometimes back to their owners. So it didn't go so well, just that there is no horse-drawn carriages on the island anymore. We wanted the breeding of animals for fur sales and fur extraction purposes to be banned. And last but not least, we wanted the Ministry of National Education to add a mandatory course on teaching children about nature and animals. But of course, that would be like a very localized version of such a course, because we do cohabit urban spaces with animals. And I mean, obviously, it might not be considered to be an ethical responsibility, but we have to know how to form a relationship with those animals so that someone doesn't get bitten and later on, make a fuss about it and it's all over the media, and that becomes a huge problem as well. So that is all I'm going to say. Of course, there are many other requests that we made. But Ezgi will now talk about what had been implemented and what the problems with the implementations were. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I will try to explain the current legislation. I will start by mentioning some administrative fines stated in the Animal Protection Law, and accordingly, failing to ensure the care of an animal under the care and responsibility requires 3,036 Turkish lira, which is only 105 euros. Forcing animals to perform acts that are clearly beyond their capacity requires 158 euro. Not taking an animal to the nearest treatment center after hitting by vehicle also requires 158 euro. Abandoning a companion animal requires administrative fine of 211 euro. Here, it is clear that these administrative fines are far from being deterrent. Now I will mention some penalties stated in the Animal Protection Law. And accordingly, intentional killing of a domesticated or companion animal requires imprisonment from 6 months to 4 years. Sexually assaulting or raping animals requires imprisonment from 6 months to 3 years. Making animals fight each other requires imprisonment from 3 months to 2 years. Torturing or cruelly treating a domesticated animal or a companion animal requires imprisonment from 6 months to 3 years. Killing an endangered animal requires imprisonment from 1 year to 5 years. And to exterminate an animal species requires imprisonment from 5 years to 10 years. Here you might think that these penalties are actually not so bad, but there are some issues which prevent people to be imprisoned for these crimes. I want to mention some of those issues. The first issue is about criminal complaint. Except in the case of red-handed crimes, if the owner of the victim animal does not submit a complaint, a written application by the ministry is required for the investigation to be started. And the ministry does not make these applications. And since there are no legal consequences of their omissions, we are not able to force them. For example, if a stray dog or cat is killed or raped or tortured, since they don't have any owner, the investigation cannot be started if the ministry does not make an application. But even this rule prevents us from filing a criminal complaint. If there is a photo or video, we file a criminal complaint arguing that it was a red-handed crime. The second issue is about crimes against multiple animals. If the crimes are committed against more than one animal at the same time, the penalty to be imposed is increased just by half. For example, if someone kills a dog, then the penalty is imprisonment from 6 months to 4 years. However, if this person kills 1,000 dogs, 10,000 dogs at the same time, then the maximum penalty can be imposed is only 6 years imprisonment. The other issue is about the commitment of a crime by people assigned to protect animals. In case the crimes are committed by persons assigned to look after or protect animals, the penalty to be imposed is increased only by half. For example, in the shelters, animals can easily be killed, tortured, raped behind the closed doors. And if a person working in a shelter commits a crime, then the penalty is increased just by half. The other issue is about adjournment mechanism in criminal execution law. The execution of imprisonment of 3 years or less might be postponed upon the request of the convict. So even the convict is sentenced to the imprisonment, he or she doesn't really go to the prison. The last issue I want to mention is deferment of the announcement of the verdict. If the penalty imposed at the end of the trial is imprisonment for 2 years or less, the court may decide to defer the announcement of the verdict. Deferral of the announcement of the verdict means that the established verdict does not have any legal consequences for the defendant. There are some conditions for the deferment. I will not go into details, but for example, with deferment, the convict becomes subject of 5 years supervision. If the convict does not commit any intentional crime within these 5 years, then his or her action will have no legal consequences. The Constitutional Court annulled this article, and annulment decision will enter into force 1st of August 2024. I would like to explain each crime in details to show how animal protection law does not really protect animals, but we have really limited time. However, I want to mention companion animals and domesticated animals, since only they are within the scope of intentional crime and torturing crimes. For example, killing an ownerless wild animal is not within the scope of these articles and within these crimes. Companion animals are animals kept in the home, workplace, or land of natural and legal persons for the purpose of special attention and companionship. They can also be wild animals kept in the home, such as parrots. Here, I want to mention some cases where the companion animals are the victims. Köpük was 2-month-old puppy. He was beaten to death. There was a video of the incident, and the perpetrator has confessed the commitment of the crime. The case is still ongoing, but during the process, the court has decided the perpetrator to work in an animal shelter, where the animals can easily be killed. It was not acceptable for such a murderer to work in a shelter. I'm excited, as you can see. Nearly 40 people came to the hearing to follow up the judicial process, and as a result of the public pressure, the decision to work in a shelter has been cancelled. And she is Sheila. She has been burned to death in her own doghouse. She has been burned to death. The perpetrator has first been sentenced to 2 years imprisonment. Then the penalty has been reduced to 1 year and 8 months due to the imprisonment's possible effects on perpetrator's future life. Even the upper limit was 4 years, the final penalty was only 1 year and 8 months, which was not acceptable. So also domesticated animals are within the scope of intentional killing and torturing crimes. What is a domesticated animal? They are animals that have been adapted to the cultural environment and trained by human beings. So they don't have to be in a certain place, such as home. Also horses, cows, stray animals are domesticated animals. Here I want to mention an unnamed cow that has been hit on the head several times with a stick in a combine affiliated with the Meat and Milk Institution. We filed a criminal complaint, and the case is still ongoing. The court has decided for just 2 officers to clean up animal feces for 15 days and read and summarize a book titled Animal Rights in Islam. I also want to talk about stray animals and their legal status. Stray animals are legally free. Municipalities can take them for the sterilization, vaccination, and registration, but then the animals must be released into the environment where they were taken from. However, in practice, the law is arbitrarily violated. After President Erdogan's speech stating that dogs should be gathered in shelters, dogs were collected by municipalities all over Turkey and started to be imprisoned in shelters. We know that there is no such thing as a warm and safe shelter. In shelters, animals are systematically exterminated behind the closed doors. A video showing this situation has been released last year. In the video, a worker in Konya shelter kills a dog by hitting with a shovel. The murderers were sentenced to 1 year imprisonment. Even the upper limit was 4 years. And this penalty has been increased to 1 year and 6 months since the murderers were assigned to protect animals. And this penalty has been reduced to 1 year and 3 months due to their regrets. Finally, the announcement of the verdict has been deferred. We already know what it means, right? If these people do not commit any intentional crime for 5 years, then their action, which is killing a dog with a shovel, will have no legal consequences. We also know that those who gave the order are as responsible as those who killed the dog, but even we filed a criminal complaint against the authorities for misconduct in office, no punishment is given to them. I will mention a bit hunting process and hunting ban in Turkey. According to the land hunting law, wild animals under protection cannot be hunted. Since only the animals under protection are within the scope of hunting ban, we file lawsuits against local hunting tenders conducted for the hunting of protected animals. So what is a protected animal? They are determined by ministry and specified in Berne Convention, such as wild goats, red deers, etc. Here we have an issue. We file lawsuits against the local hunting tenders and ask for the court to grant stay of execution decision. And if the court grants this decision, hunting process stops. And if we win the case, then the animals in this area are saved. However, sometimes the courts do not grant stay of execution decision. In this case, the hunting doesn't stop. Hunting continues. And even if we win the case afterwards, it means nothing because the hunting process didn't stop and all the animals are already died. I also want to mention about dolphin parks. According to the animal protection law, it is forbidden to establish new dolphin parks. Cansu already mentioned about it. Existing dolphin parks cannot increase their capacity, and they will terminate their activities until 14th of July 2031. Last year, a dolphin park in Turkey came to the fore with the deaths of 5 dolphins in a row. We filed a criminal complaint about these deaths with Freedom for Dolphins platform. In the investigation, the violations and omissions of the facility owners and ministry in charge of inspections were revealed with documents. With increasing public pressure, these violations became impossible to hide, and the park was eventually closed completely. There were 2 more dolphins that are survived in this park, but they were sold to another park before closing, even it was forbidden by law. In the facility, there were pregnant dolphins. Even breeding was forbidden. Necessary inspections are not carried out, and law is violated. So they keep violating the law, and we keep struggling with these violations. Here, I want to show you a photo of Tom and Misha, who have been rescued from a dolphin park in Turkey in 2010. They were rehabilitated by Born Free, and they returned to the natural life in 2012. Tom, Misha, and all other rescued animals saved with all of our struggle give us a hope to continue the legal fight. We know that is an exhausting process, but we know that we are right in our fight. The world will become a better place for animals, and this is only possible with our struggle and solidarity. The fight for animal rights is a long-term struggle. We need to leave it to the next generation as good as it is possible. It is very important that we can leave precedent decisions to next generations. As animal rights defenders, we are not many. Considering the number of the lawyers is very small, it is very important for everyone to take part in legal struggle. All animal rights defenders, whether they are lawyers or not, should know the regulations and start a legal process against the violations. It is very important to make animal rights visible in judicial process, because if we all don't do that, nobody will. I want to end with Burak Özgüner's quote. He was an animal rights activist. He is one of the founders of Animal Rights Watch Committee. And once he has passed away 4 years ago. And once he said, as those who desire absolute freedom without exception for animals, humans, and nature, we will continue to change the world wherever we are, with our rejection, with our joy, and with our fury. These are our sources. And thanks for listening. We are here.